Welcome into a special late edition of the Daily Deep Cut, brought to you by the Beat Sessions. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. Happy New Year to all of you. I hope you've had a fantastic day. I hope last night was fun and full of celebration for each and every one of you. I celebrated pretty hard with some friends. We actually, unfortunately, had a little bit of tragedy with one of the friend groups and one of the pups. It's unfortunate. So we were honoring her. Good old Addie was the dog's name. She was a good girl, and yeah, I think that tonight's deep cut is an appropriate track to begin the year with. I'm excited to talk about this song. It's hard to believe it's been 17 years, almost 20 years since Interpol put out their third record. A fantastic record, though. I think that Our Love to Admire is a record, given time, grows on most people. It's much more, I don't want to say much more different, but there are certainly a lot of differences in the record versus Turn on the Bright Lights and Antics. The band moving to Capitol Records, signing on to a major label, just wanting to grow more. And I don't see any way that you can hold that against any artist. You look at the bands that were really blowing up at that time in the mid-2000s as far as the alternative rock and roll music scene, and a good fair amount of them were on major labels. And so to see them make that move to Capitol, and the band, they even talk about how Radiohead was a major factor in picking Capitol. What they did with Kid A, what they did with Amnesiac, something exceptional. And so I certainly would never fault these guys for their ambition. It's definitely not my favorite Interpol record, but there are fantastic songs on this album, and in particular, Rest My Chemistry is a song that I've heard so many different opinions about it over the years. It's what I love about it. I love how polarizing this song is, this record. I think the negative opinions that I've heard will call this track self-indulgent to a certain degree, kind of slow and lulling. And I love the pace of the track. Let's start with there. As far as this conversation, I think that the pace of the track really creates this introspective mood, this time and place where the subject at hand is contemplating all sorts of things. He's contemplating the past and how that's, how it's gone, how, there's no going back to the good old days, the fatigue that comes with just life in general. And I'm sure that there's hints of Paul talking about the stress that he felt for a number of reasons, talking about the difficulties with the creation of this record, moving to the major label. I know at the time he had become sober, so not drinking, trying to make that transition into into the new phase of his life as a person and as an artist. And that's, it's a big thing for me today, January 1st, 2025. Gonna lay off the sauce for a bit. I'm not saying that I'm not drinking ever again, period. But I think that this song, I've been thinking about it a lot. Just been thinking about you guys and the channel as far as the hindrance that is there. I feel like there was so much of me in the past that was like, a couple beers at the end of the night, not a big deal. But I feel like there's mornings where I don't want to get up. I don't feel motivated to get out of bed. I feel lethargic. I feel cloudy. I feel that it's a result of, having 2 or 3 beers a night. And it's something that just, like I said, it never seemed to be a big deal, or I never thought anything of it. But more so in 2024 than any other year, I could just feel it. I could feel the impact it was having on just how I felt every day, getting up, going about my day, working on the channel, trying to stay focused. And this track, that's just one of the many subjects of this song, one of the many angles I think that you could talk about that makes it exceptional, and I think makes the slower pace of the track. It gives it more of a contemplative mood. It gives this track this pensive quality of really giving deep thought and consideration to, how do I move forward into the next chapter, into the next phase? How do I make myself better, frankly? Resting my chemistry. I mean, it can refer to substances. It can refer to, I think there's a number of lines in this song that allude to the idea of a lover, or some type of love interest, some type of situation of lust or desire that is there, and not just that. There's the idea of moving into older age, moving out of that youthfulness, and all the chaos and some of the stupid decision making that goes along with that. Obviously, it's how we grow as people, how we learn our lessons, but there's definitely a point I feel that most people reach in their lives where like they've just had enough. They are exhausted with whatever repercussions they might be dealing with when it comes to their behavior and to their situation. And so I love this song and the energy first and foremost for that reason. Talking about the move to Capitol Records, the shift that was there. The guys in Interpol talk about joining Capitol Records. There was all this personnel that was there, and then when the buyout happened, all these people were fired, and they ended up working with a bunch of people that that really, like, there wasn't any relationship that was developed. It wasn't like they were bad to them. It wasn't like they were forcing the band to write a certain way or to hit certain deadlines. There wasn't this nastiness from the label. It was more of just a kind of indifference. It was almost kind of like the label didn't even really care about the band at all. And so it's unfortunate that they felt that way. I think it's incredible that after the release of Our Love to Admire and realizing that moving to Capitol wasn't the right decision, I mean, the record label basically just like shook their hands and was like, we're good. Like, we'll call it. They had a 2-record contract, I do believe, and obviously only made the one. And just, it's just something that's really unheard of to see a record label kind of just say, okay, like, we can part ways amicably and just, both of us can move in our own directions and do our own thing. So thankful for that, because there's certainly a number of bands and a number of situations throughout history where the stress and tension that was created ultimately led to the demise of the band. I think that this maybe even is a bit of the starting point for Carlos D moving on from the band. And I will admit, on this particular record, the one thing that really took me a long time to come to terms with this record, and even with the song that we're talking about tonight, Rest My Chemistry, is the lack of impact that the rhythm section had. Our Love to Admire is, it's full of wonderful guitar interplay, Paul, Daniel doing their thing as always, moments where it's maybe a little self-indulgent, but their first 2 records, the compositions are just so tight, just so on point. The guitars just clashing off each other, moving around another, just brilliantly. And there is Sam and Carlos D just driving the thing, creating these urgent tempo so often in songs. Even the mellow moments. I think of a song like Leif Erikson and just the intensity of that simple percussion that Sam is bringing to the table as that song opens up. Carlos, just what he does with his staccato style and the drive that is there and the unique flair. It's I feel like a lot of bands they really fall flat as far as making their rhythm section just something there as kind of a foundation as a base. And I think that's where you got a lot of the Joy Division comparisons too with these guys, not just Paul Banks and his vocals seeming somewhat similar to Ian's, but I think the way that Peter Hook plays his bass like a guitar, and I think Carlos plays his bass the exact same way. It's almost like the third guitar throwing in another riff that Sam gets to beat the skins around. And so not having that element on this record be quite as present is unfortunate. It is kind of a bummer. But I do think that, picking to move your compositions in a different direction, moving your sound in a different direction might require some concession on the part of bandmates. And while Carlos is still outstanding, and especially his work on the keys, and this is a record too, they talk about the songwriting process That's the first time that the keyboard came right out and was really directly involved. And on Rest My Chemistry, there's no denying just the magic of that piano that opens up. It just twinkles. It's icy. It's cold. It's just setting this really almost kind of like gothic, ethereal mood. And I love the way the guitar just crashes in, and you get this big chugging riff. And then there's that second one that just like drives against it there intermittently, and then you get the signature riff after the first few bars, and just a wonderful combination of sounds between Daniel and Paul there. But I love the kind of just so slow swing of Sam's drums throughout this song. And Carlos D, like his bass is just thick and sludgy and really moves perfectly with that just slow swinging groove that they develop on this track. So I think that while it's a little different, you still get two guys that are just so strong and so brilliant together. It really is unfortunate the way that the fallout happened. I think Paul has done a pretty damn good job of picking up bass duties since Carlos's departure, but there's no denying, and especially if you had a chance to see them live. I've never seen a band more live in my life than these guys. I've seen these guys like 12 times. They are without a doubt my favorite. And watching Carlos do his thing on stage, I mean, all of them really have just a magnetic presence, but he was something else. You know, he can shred that bass and is marvelous to watch. So I would say that working with Rich Costi as well, he worked with the likes of Muse and Franz Ferdinand. You know, talk about two acts that talking about big commercial labels wanting to branch out, wanting to grow your fan base, wanting to have more visibility. So I think working with Rich was a good decision, all things considered. I would say in general, the move to Capitol wasn't a good one, but it's even hard to say that too, because had that not happened, where would these guys be? It's tough to know what their sound would be like, if they would even still be around had they not made this move. Ultimately, in doing so, they learned a lot. They learned a lot about themselves as people and as a unit, as a band. I think they learned a lot about the creative process and how, maybe making that concession to be on a smaller label to have more creative freedom is the way to go. And certainly now, where we're at in this day and age, we're talking about an album that was made in 2007. It's remarkable how massive social media has become. And for a band like them, being on Matador it's not a hindrance. There's so many ways to get out there, promote. They opened for U2 on the 360 tour, for Christ's sake. There's so many different methods, both with media platforms and by just getting out there and playing, that can help you build your fan base. Playing festivals, getting into spots where there are large draws for a number of different bands, and maybe you're able to pull in some of those fans at those shows. But I think that it's you just cannot fault the ambition at the end of the day for just wanting to try to do something different, wanting to see if maybe this is the right turn that we take to capture the creative growth that we're pursuing. And while it may not have worked out, I think it yielded a number of phenomenal results, especially in this track, Rest My Chemistry. I do want to get into the lyrics here. It's a fun one. Opening up with and hearing the opinions on this song too. There's no doubt. I haven't slept in 2 days. I've bathed in nothing but sweat. There's and maybe I'm wrong, but there's nothing that sounds more like cocaine than those two lines right there. There's definitely points in this song where I feel the exhaustion is coming from a different part of this individual's life. So the opening right there, it feels like we are just burning out, coming down off of substances, and and you do stuff like that, and you sit there and you party night after night after night, and you don't get your sleep. And I've made hallways scenes for things to regret. Love that line too, because now we've taken a step out of maybe drug fueled behavior and the consequences that one can face because of that, to just something in general. I mean, I think that, how many times have we unfortunately seen, like a couple of lovers that are arguing with each other in public? It could be relationship matters. It could be anything at this point, but there's this idea of being so emotionally strapped that you can't even keep your equanimity in front of people. Like you're breaking down, and you're and you're just having this massive fallout in front of people and making a scene. And the song continues to go on. My friends, they come, and the lines, they go by. That's another reference where it's tough to not think of substance abuse and the people that do go along with that. I think that that's a big realization for any of us who have spent periods of our life partying, being young, doing all that stuff. Oftentimes the wrong people are brought into our circles, and they're the people that, they're looking for a freebie. It may be a line of cocaine. It might be a little bit of cash. Like, it could be anything. Once again, while the lines, in my opinion, I think they allude to that, they get bigger, and they go beyond that. And I think there's this general idea of just being exhausted because you're being taken advantage of. And that's something that all of us can certainly relate to. Tonight, I'm going to rest my chemistry. Tonight, I'm going to rest my chemistry. I live my life filled with no pain, just some rage, and 3 kinds of yes. That's just like a signature Paul Banks right there. There's sometimes where you read the lines that this guy writes, and you're just like, huh? If you guys have any insight on that particular line, I would love to hear your opinions, your thoughts. Just some rage, and like 3 kinds of yes. I'm not really sure what he's alluding to there. Maybe I'm being really naive at this point, which is unfortunate. But I've always just taken that as one of those lines that is just so quintessentially Paul Banks. I've made stairways, such scenes for things that I regret. So again, going back to that opening stanza with I've made hallway scenes for things to regret. Oh, those days in the sun, they bring a tear to my eye. Tonight I'm going to rest my chemistry. And I read that line, and I'm not thinking literally in the sun, thinking like in a bright, better place. Those days where life was good, where I didn't have the anxiousness that I do. I didn't have the frustration. I didn't have the pain, the angst that I'm dealing with. And then there's this moment where, but you're so young, you look in my eyes, you're so young, so sweet, so surprised. This focus on some type of love interest, some type of, like I've read opinions that the female focus or the lover focus is a groupie, and Paul's basically just like too strung out to even do anything with her. And I mean, to a certain degree, he says in the second part around, you look so young like a daisy in my lazy eye. I've heard a lot of criticism about that line over the years as well. Some people just saying like, Paul, like, what the hell? And it's not impressive. I think it's a cool line. I think the lazy eye reference definitely is alluding to just like the bags, just having just that look on your face of just being so burnt out, so done, like not even really knowing necessarily where you're at. And that's that indulgent party phase. And I will be the first to admit that I've been there, where you're just like so messed up and you're just basically indifferent to everything that's going on around you. You're like, oh, a cute girl wants to come up and talk to me, like, cool, like come sit in my lap or whatever. It's I think that if you look beyond the simple surface level idea that this song is self-indulgent, I think there's this idea of the behavior being so vapid and not, just there's just nothing worthwhile there in that situation, in that moment in life, in your condition. And I think, it may not be the most poetic exploration of this idea, but I think it's certainly still a solid one. And, I'm a big believer, I will always argue that this song and these lines do go beyond just the simple kind of like rock and roll self-indulgence. And I mean, even if that's what it is, it's like that's Paul's experience, that's his life, that's that's who he may have been at this time, like writing, criticizing, reflecting on himself, knowing that he can be bigger and better. So tonight I'm going to rest my chemistry. It ends with that refrain. I do love that first go around, but he says, when you're so young, you look in my eyes, you're so young, so sweet, so surprised. And just that frenzied guitar that comes in. I really love that tremolo action that Daniel's bringing to the table with that. And just the brilliance of the keys that play in the background too. They're soft, they're definitely nuanced, but having such an impact. And I think that's another spot where Carlos is missed. I think the impact that he had during the writing process, during the recording process on the first two records, and with this one, being their keyboard guy, working with that element, it really made these guys. It's a big part of what made them and makes them so one of a kind still, in my opinion. I think stylistically they've carried on a lot of what he brought to the table for the band, while still trying to carve out their own niche as a three-piece without him. But that pretty much brings us to the end of this track right here. It is one of my favorite. It's the 8th song, buried in a set list it's very interesting. I do love the way that Our Love to Admire opens with Pioneer to the Falls. You just get this big spaced out piece, and I think that's the coolest thing about this record is, talking about Turn on the Bright Lights and Antics and the way that those compositions were so tight and so driven. This is an album where you see them taking an advantage and exploring space more. And Rest My Chemistry, with its pace, with that sludgy bass riff, with the different guitar elements that work and play around each other, is a highlight to me for that reason. And I think it is really one of the better songs that they have in their catalog. It's a marvelous number. If you're not familiar with it, go ahead and give it a go. I know it's kind of late, but better late than never. And I'm looking forward to just resting my chemistry as well and being with you guys this year in a more, I guess, heightened sense, with more of a heightened awareness of the music scene that's going on around all of us, and just trying to deliver better and more enjoyable content for all of you. And I think that is what makes this such a great song to lead the year off with as well. So enjoy this track, give the album a whole listen to if you haven't in a while, or if you're not familiar with it. And I will see you guys tomorrow morning for another installment of the Daily Deep Cut. We'll see you next time, all right?